Welcome to the BYOB podcast. I'm Andrew Ford, and I have another Andrew joining me today, Andrew Baxter, who I've worked with. He was one of my very, very first customers, even before I had started the business. He was a customer, and we actually go far way back before that. So we'll tell you the full story in just a moment, but welcome,
Thank
Andrew
you,
Baxter.
Andrew. Good to be here. So we've a bit of fun, I think.
Yeah, I think so. So we met way back in the advertising days when you were CEO of advertising companies, and I was actually your
That's right.
client. So I was spending money with you back then. But we'll get into that in a moment. But I wanted to just give people an introduction of yourself, the businesses you run. I want to hear about the 24-hour business plan. So maybe just give a quick intro, and then we'll delve back into the
Yeah. No, look, I mean, nowadays I have got what they call the classic portfolio career, where I'm doing about 6, 7, 8 things at once. I sit on 4 or 5 boards. I'm chair of Australian Pork, which is like meat and livestock that many are aware of, but for the pork industry, which is a $6 billion industry in Australia. I'm a non-exec director of Foresters Financial, of Hype Tap, as well as Agriculture Innovation Australia and Growth Ops, which is back in the old advertising world. It's a similar, it's one of the largest independent groups in Australia. And I also sit on Sydney Symphony Orchestra and Oz Harvest, are my 2 not-for-profit boards. Do a little bit of work for private equity, and also set up accidentally the 24-hour business plan, which helps corporates and companies of any sizes with their business planning process. So it keeps me busy.
Yeah, I was we were just having a laugh off camera about how, you just can't help it. When you're an entrepreneur at heart, you see an opportunity, you got to grab it, and I think I'll take a bit of time off and rest, and that's when you get the best ideas, and
Yeah,
then you're off again,
exactly
right?
right. I
So,
think my good
I
wife, and she was like, "You're meant to be semi-retired. What are you doing? Starting another business? Off you go." So, but look, it's energizing. The Yeah, you do
you
love it.
love it, right?
We'll get onto the
Yeah.
24-hour business plan in a minute, I'm sure. But it's just, I think that mix of different clients and different things every day just keeps you very energized and keeps the brain ticking over, which is terrific.
Yeah. Now, you're my classic example of a portfolio career. I talk about you a bit in my
No,
business.
all
Hope
good.
you don't mind. You did write the forward
I
for my
did.
book, so you set yourself up there. I'm actually on to book 2
I know.
now, so I'll be
Yes,
hitting you up soon for
done.
that. um, but before we get into the sort of the present, I do want to go back because I love hearing a backstory, and I don't actually know this about you. So I want to ask you, what was your first paying job? Were you always an entrepreneur? Were you a letterbox drop kid or a newspaper deliverer? Or
Interestingly, I was actually talking about this week. I was in running a workshop for Hallmark cards, and my father was the head of logistics at John Sands greeting cards back in the day. This is the 80s,
I remember
and
them.
and often in the school holidays, they were always looking for people to help either do stock taking or do a lot of counting. I remember Lotus and Excel were brand new back then, and I was quite interested in that. So I used to spend a lot of my holiday time in at John Sands, doing labor of counting cards and putting it into systems, and it was
Yeah,
actually quite an interesting thing to do. You certainly got used to understanding how sort of major corporates worked, the sort of culture that was in there back then. At lunchtime, all the senior leaders would go in there and play cards together while they ate their lunch that they all bought together. I mean, some of these things that happened,
really.
you look back on, and that classic tea room, lunchroom type thing, and there was a really good atmosphere and camaraderie in there. And I was only a 15 or 16-year-old kid. And then my first job at uni was selling books. So often people will knock on your door in your office, and they'll say, "Oh, look, we've got some discounted books, and can we just leave them in the tea room or at reception?" And it might be a book that came out a year and a half ago, and
Yeah,
all of a sudden it's a quarter the price. And that was my job. I ran around town. I actually made a lot of money in my first year of uni doing that job. And
really.
getting to know people, building relationships with receptionists and people that might have run the kitchen or the tea room or whatever it might have been back in those days. And I thought that was all wonderful. And then my dad left John Sands after 27 years and bought a news agency, which was a bit of a logical progression, I suppose. That's who John Sands mostly sold to at the time.
Yeah,
And all of a sudden, myself and my brother, who was also at uni, became, you know, effectively paper boys at the age of
Paper
19
deliverer.
or 20, and we'd work behind the counter at the newsagent. So you got used to a lot of retail and talking to people and having great customer experience and all that sort of stuff. So that was my sort of first 3 jobs before the real world.
Yeah, wow, I didn't know that. And it's interesting because my family had an office products company and we bought John Sand's products. And just a memory popped in my head of the purchasing officer used to be a smoker and he had an overflowing ashtray on his desk in a paper business. I mean, what could go wrong?
I was talking to someone the other day about smoking. My first real job, advertising job. I'll get back to my first job after uni was at Gillette in a sales role. Selling stationery because Gillette used to own Papermate and Liquid Paper and Parker Pens. So I was lucky enough to get a job as a salesperson, and then I drifted into the Gillette side of things, Oral-B and all that sort of stuff, and then went into an advertising agency, Young Rubicam. But the smoking story. So I remember we were in an old building on St Kilda Road. It's still there. It's the Four Seasons today, or the Seasons Hotel, I think, on St Kilda Road.
The Seasons,
and basically, if you were a smoker, you got the offices with a window. And I was quite annoyed as a non-smoker that I didn't have an office with a window. So it was basically.
You say I'm a drinker? Can I have an office in a corner or something?
So, the late 80s, early 90s, different times.
Different times. So that's the pivot into advertising, and you worked in advertising a long time. That's where we met because you were CEO of Badger Ogilvy. I was at Census. We were spending money with DT Digital, I think it was at the time. So how did you get to CEO? Like that's a pretty meteoric rise.
Look, I didn't, in a way, going through uni, I didn't realize that whilst I was doing a marketing degree, and I knew I was always interested in that side of business. I think subliminally, a lot of my family were in advertising. So two of my uncles owned their own ad agency. One of those uncles went on to become the head of marketing at Target. And my auntie was a graphic designer in those sort of days. My other cousin was the creative director at John Singleton Advertising. And then my other cousin, Mark, who's the same age as me, had an incredible career. He now runs IPG, or Interpublic, one of the large agency groups in Australia. So in a way, we had a bit of a family history. It wasn't really talked about too much, but subliminally, maybe there was an input. So I got to work at Young Rubicam. My cousin was in there working already in media, and they won the Nintendo account. And he said, you should apply for the account manager's job. This is 1993. So I did that, went through a series of interviews and was lucky enough to get that job as the account manager. And the extra luck was that my boss at the time was the CEO of the agency, and that was because he'd promised when they won the account that he'd personally run the account for the first 12 months. So it was very cool that I was reporting to the CEO as a 25-year-old, 24-year-old, and I learned a lot. Didn't say a lot in my first year because you were sitting in a room with a really experienced person. He'd run Clemenger and he'd run Ogilvy before that, and then he was running Y&R. So that was a great experience. I still see John today. John's in his mid to late 70s. He's still a great mentor. And we have lunch with him once a year at least, and which is amazing. So I had a great sort of series of mentors through Y&R, and so I had nearly 10 years there, and after 6 years I went up to the Sydney office and became sort of the 2IC, the head of account management. So I worked hard in those early days on Nintendo, Chupa Chups, Converse. We did some great advertising work that's still quite well regarded today. Then went to Sydney, worked on.
It's in your book, I believe, isn't it? Be in your book, that advertising work, wouldn't it?
And it's on my website. And then Sydney had some other great clients: Jim Beam, Taubman's Paints, H&R Block. Also doing some famous campaigns. And in 2002, after 10 years there, I actually went into my own agency with a fellow uni mate, footy mate, schoolmate, Brett Carty. He's still got that agency today called Advertising Associates. His dad and 2 others owned it. They were looking for a couple of youngsters to come in and take it over. And I probably learnt more in 2 years of when it's your own money, of what to do and what not to do. And Brett and I had a lot of fun. I think we were very grateful that our wives had very good jobs at the time and could earn a lot of money while we lost some. So that was sort of a good journey into management. And then I got called about a role at Singleton, Ogilvy and Mather to run sort of the KFC, News Limited, Kimberly Clark, group of clients, and that was sort of worked in there. And within a little while, I was became the second in charge of the agency there. They called it the executive director, and that was at the time, that was the biggest single agency in the country doing very famous work, outside of just the accounts I looked after. They were doing all the Qantas ads and Telstra ads, and it was an amazing place to work. And 2.5 years into that, they bought a whole lot of agencies in Melbourne, including DT Digital that you just mentioned, as well as Badger, and they were wanting to merge all three together. And they said, well, you're a Melbourne guy originally. Would you mind going down and doing that merger? And that was, thankfully, because mergers are tough. 9 out of 10 mergers in agencies don't work. This was merging 3 companies together, not not 2. Degree of difficulty high, but it ended up being an incredible merger. It was great times. We went from 140 odd people when we merged to 310 people within 2 years. DT Digital went on a real roll. Today they're called AKQA. It's a great business. We did some famous work. Rhonda and Katut came out of the Melbourne office at the time, and then later on when I became national CEO, the Share a Coke campaign launched not long after, which is the names on the side of the cans of the Coke. So it was a pretty amazing time, that 10 years at Ogilvy, as I worked through to become CEO. But I think it was a combination of working hard, listening, learning, doing great work. Obviously the people skills and managing and corralling and encouraging and motivating people to do incredible work that had a great commercial return was a big part of that. And I think when you have a reasonably consistent track record, then the opportunities to be promoted were there. And I was lucky enough through most of that time to be growing either the accounts I ran or the businesses I ran. And I think when you do that, you get lucky enough to get other opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, obviously the highlights meeting me when I was there. So
fun work. I was sort of toward the end of the halcyon days of Census, and it was Yellow Pages flipping into Census. Their first dabbles into social media. You were the head of social media.
We did some great stuff there. Like I remember, when we very first started, because I flipped it to you, not to you personally, but because we just couldn't find the sort of digital fit, and you guys presented well. And I mean, I don't think you were in the original pitch, but I just liked the whole vibe in the company. You could tell they were on the up. They were doing new things, and we really wanted that. I had a small agency doing sort of really experimental stuff at no scale. So, and I remember we had a great experience working with you guys and many, many different campaigns. Actually, you probably don't know this, but the very first website I built, so now I've built hundreds of websites. We do it every day. I built one on the weekend last weekend for a new client. And we spent, I think it was $350,000 building a website with you. but it wasn't just a website. It was selling the Where Is maps to car companies in an automated it was full ERP. It was from basically getting a CD, selling it, through the website, getting the right model, distributing. And we made $1 million in the first year. So the ROI was exponential because it was all digital. It's just a printed CD.
It was amazing. Nowadays,
but you guys helped us with the entire
nowadays you've got
thing.
Google Maps and Apple Maps on your phone. Back then, it was a race to get software into cars on screens and things like that, so that you could go. That team at DT is incredible. And David Trewern, who was the founder of that, he was the D and the T. He's gone on to found and exit 2 other businesses. Most recently, Flightboard, which many people will know is that when you see people down the beach and it looks like a kite surf, but it's got no sail on it. They're just zooming around. They've got a motor underneath like a surfboard. That's David's business. Yeah.
Oh, really?
He just sold that or part of it to, I think, the company that owns Mercury outboard motors and all the boats and things. And then you had a couple of the other young team members back then, Adam Boper and Tim Evans, that you know well, and they founded BBE, which they sold to McCann into that group. And then Athan, who was one of the great young digital designers. I don't know if you work with him. He's the founder of July Luggage, which has clearly taken off in a big way most recently. So it was a very, very talented, and that's just. I'm just naming a few. There's still some of them are still there, still running that business in Melbourne and regionally. Brian Vella, so Alicia and a few others. So it's a lot of them have gone on to have incredible careers. So you're right, it was a hotbed of great young talent, early days of digital and
Yeah.
e-commerce and all those things. So it was I think your phrase of it was a great vibe. Every time you walked onto the floor in there in that part of the building, it was you're always very energized.
Yeah. And I remember those days, like we started having conversations because we were like, obviously you drop in and say good day because we're spending lots of money. And then we had a coffee because I always found you very personable, very social. And I think that was set the tone for the whole company. Everyone was very engaged and authentic, like not, we're cool advertising people and have a bit of attitude, which some did at the day. But then what I found was, we started having conversations and talking about Twitter and social media and what's the latest and what's going to happen. And then this is my memory of the events is that you were like, oh, one day I want to set up my own business, and we started talking about your brand, which is personal branding was brand new. I mean, I'd only just started sort of doing this on
Yeah.
the side for friends. And we started doing a bit of work together. But you had this vision of where you wanted to go, this portfolio career. You're like, oh, 5 years. And I was like, you had a great job. Why? Why did you want to pivot? What
Yeah,
was
I
the
just
motivation for that?
I
After your
know.
previous experience of having an agency that didn't
I
work
think I
so
was
well.
looking at it the other day. I think we built my current website in 2013 or something. It was like a long time ago.
Yeah,
and so what happened? I actually wrote an article on this recently, and for those listening, we can put a link through, I'm sure. But
yeah,
that first boss of mine I mentioned before, John Peters, I remember him sitting me down when I was 25 and saying, "Look, it's all well and good in here. Everyone's having a lot of fun, but how many 45-year-olds are there in this business?" And I'm looking around the room going, bit of a trick question. Just you, John? What's the point? He goes, well, the point
yeah,
is exactly that. Unless you think you're going to be the CEO of an agency one day, you better start thinking about your second career now because this is a young person's game. And people now talk about ageism in advertising, which is potentially true. So, I was at that point, I'm like, wow, that's, at 45, I could well be needing another career for the next 20 years of my life. And I started thinking about some of the things I wouldn't mind doing. I remember having chats with other senior people in the industry, not just at the agencies I was at, and realised that boards was an option. At the time, I think I was sitting on the footy club board that I played for, and
you were,
I was president of the
yeah,
cricket club. So I was actually interested. Yeah.
charitable
So
ones.
I ended up.
Yeah,
By the time I got to 40, I thought, what, I'll start sitting on some decent not-for-profit boards to get give some time back to things that I was really passionate about, but B,
experience.
learn from good people around boards. Because a lot of the better not-for-profit boards have got incredibly experienced board members on their boards. And I went on that journey effectively for the next 10 years. And I got through to 50 before I stepped away from the advertising world and flipped into this portfolio career that I'm in now. So you're right. It was a very deliberate and planned approach in terms of arguably I was I made my own choice to exit when and after probably one of the most successful years I'd had. I think Publicis I was running at the time and had a record year.
Yeah,
And kindly
yeah.
the regional CEO actually put that in the press release to say that this is off the back of a whole lot of successes. So it was a good time to get out. But I think the point my boss made back then was that it didn't matter how good you'd been. It was a bit like an AFL footballer or NRL. If you won the Brownlow medal or the equivalent in the NRL, one bad year after the age of 30 in those sports, they're pretty much going to cut you anyway. It's not about how you used to be.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
you're always one average year away from potentially it not being in your control. So I made that choice and I worked hard for 10 years in building up my board experience. And then when I decided to step away, it was certainly it's hard to build up a board portfolio to get it right, but at least it gave me a bit of a head start in knowing what to do. So yeah, that was the journey. It's there's no more to it than that.
Yeah, but it's just very very sensible planning. But a lot of people don't want to let go of the golden handcuffs of a paycheck every month. And I guess you did have that. Boards do. I remember talking to you were doing the charitable boards, the free boards, the charitable ones to the paid ones. And I remember I think you had 10 of them at one
Too many.
stage when you left. Like it was just a bit of a flood, too many. And then we talked about we'll do some consulting, maybe a bit of speaking. You're doing your writing, did your book, and then it's like all of a sudden you got this business idea. I'm like, from going to, oh, we'll just work 3 days a week.
Yeah, that was the plan.
and yeah,
Yeah,
what
look,
happened?
it was interesting. Not long after I, announced that I was leaving Publicis and going to pursue this board and advisory career, I got a call. I think one of the early ones might have been from KFC, which was a great client I'd worked on obviously for a long time at Ogilvy, and their CEO rang me and said, "Oh, what are you up to? And what are you allowed to do and not allowed to do? No doubt you'll have a bit of a some sort of break and all that sort of stuff." And
Pause.
I said, "Look, certainly I can do a little, as long as I don't go and do any advertising work. I'm right."
Yeah.
And they said, "Oh, would you like to come and run our strategy days? We're doing 3 days down out of Adelaide. Half the exec team, our systems globally. Could you just help facilitate our away day so that I, as a CEO, can participate rather than facilitating?" And I was like, "Yeah, well, absolutely." And so helped them, and it was a bit of a, it was they had quite a strong brief in terms of how they wanted it run. They had a a global format they had to go into, and it started getting me thinking about, oh, what were the best business planning and strategy planning frameworks that I'd seen, because I was lucky enough as the CEO of a couple of the biggest agencies in the country to be invited along to a lot of strategy days for major clients, and you saw all sorts of different things that worked and didn't work. And I used to write the better ones in the back of a notebook. We all carry around our notebooks, and in the back page I'd always be writing, oh, that's quite a good culture framework, or that's quite a good purpose framework, or that's a good way to do your vision, or that's a good way to do this. And and certainly at WPP and Publicis, they also had some some good frameworks, and some in my opinion not so good. But in the end, I sort of grabbed all my old notebooks out, and then sure enough, about once a month for the first 12 months that I was out, I got a similar call to that. Oh, could you come and help it? And I'm like,
Oh,
this is
really?
weird. Like, I'm, nowhere on my LinkedIn, nowhere on my CV does it say that I could facilitate strategy days for companies. But I think people knew me as somebody that was passionate about, commercial strategy and unlocking value in companies, unlocking growth in companies. So after about 12 months, I went, maybe there's a business in this. Like, this is really interesting. At this point, I'd sort of more been doing facilitation, using a couple of my frameworks, but not a full framework. So I started mucking around with, how can I pull all the best of the best together into one framework? And what does that look like? And how many days would it take with executive teams to build something? And then I started thinking through all the pain points of, well, business planning actually is painful. Getting your team in a room, even if it's only 2 or 3 of you that are part of the business, it's hard to align diaries. The urgent gets in the way of the important. And then what normally happens is each of you divide, oh, why don't you do that bit of the plan? I'll do that bit. I'll do that bit. And you actually don't have the full discussion. And various parts of the business don't understand what each other's genuinely doing. So I thought, wow, if I could do this and actually help them co-write it in the room and almost give them an output, fairly quickly afterwards, that would be pretty cool. And then COVID hit. And then I was like, well, maybe I could digitize as much of this as possible. If we're going to be presenting this online, there's no post-it notes and butcher's paper and all the normal things you use. So then we, my wife is a senior academic at Sydney Uni. She sees some amazing people that go through the university in terms of students. And so we tapped a couple of students that we sort of knew well to come and work for us, and they started typing up the notes in real time in the room. So rather than someone writing it on or in the virtual room, because we were online. So this all happened over about a 2-year period, where we got to the point where we almost tested and learned on about 24 to 27 clients without actually officially telling anyone we had a business in business planning. So at this point, it was just literally random calls of people, or people who'd been through it telling someone else. We just had a great experience. It was quite different. It was practical. It was actionable. It wasn't just theory. And my other point was, how can you make it really simple, actionable, practical, but how can you overlay a storytelling framework or a visual framework? And how can you make it small, less rather than more? So all of this came together with all through this beta test to launch what's now the 24-hour business plan. It's called that because we normally do 4 6-hour sessions with executive teams or 3 8-hour sessions. And we do co-write the plan in the room with them. We work them through the framework. It's got everything you'd expect in a business plan. All the normal. If you Googled business plan template tomorrow, it'll say market context, target audience, industry trends, competitors, purpose. What's your vision? What's your core offering? What are your values? What's your culture? What's your growth? I mean, everything that's normally in a business plan we've got in there, but we've laddered it all together. put that classic red thread through the whole thing so that it's as one. And we've also aligned the long-term strategy to the short term, because a lot of companies will do the long-term strategic piece. Oh, here's your 3 to 5 year plan. And then they don't have a way to actually practically execute that. And others are very good at doing the operational or executional plan, but don't really have the experience to do the longer term plan. So that was how it started. It took off pretty quickly. Fast forward 3 years since launch, we've done 150 companies. Mind you, recognizing that I'm doing this literally part-time because of all my other commitments. But we have just in the last 9 months trained up 20 other ex-CEOs to be able to facilitate these sessions. And now, we're in scale mode. So it's gone from, a nice idea, well beta tested with some big corporates, as well as good startups. So it's been amazing. Off the 150, I think we've done 15 industry verticals. We've done as big as $2 billion companies down to pre-revenue startups.
Wow.
Everything.
Yeah. What I love about that story is that, you had a plan and you had you're proactive in your career, and, as a CEO, you're thinking ahead. That's your job. And then, so I'm going to get out, but you didn't have this as an idea, but it just came to you, but you ran with it. And here's what I love about those sort of entrepreneurial situations is that, it's a natural progression. But you could have gone, oh no, that's not in the plan. I'm not going to do it. I'll do 3 of them and that's it. But you went, oh, there's something here, and then you ran with it because it was an opportunity. And even when COVID hit, you went, oh, well, I'll do the same thing, but it's a chance to modify. And I know a lot of businesses that actually improved over COVID because they digitized and they went, virtual, and now it's scalable. So it sounds like you've gone through that same journey. So, exciting times, and it sounds like it's going to go.
It
global.
is. We've got 3 senior advisors in Singapore now already. And we launched up there late September last year. So we've got a couple of amazing people there. We've got interest in the UK, the US, Greece, Poland and Eastern Europe, South Africa so far. So we've been in discussions. We're trying to get Singapore right first and almost build the playbook for how you would launch in a new market. Singapore's good because it's 9-hour flight and it's similar time zone and Australian speaking, English speaking. Sorry, we've got one Australian who I was thinking about on the team up there who happens to be an expat. So we're building that playbook out over the first 12 months, documenting everything that's working and not working, fine tuning, and that'll enable us. We hope that if we then go and launch, say in the UK or the US, then we've actually got a tighter way to do that. So.
So one thing that's interesting about the model that I like is there's a bunch of people like you. I mean, I work with them every day who are corporate escapees. I was a CEO. I've retired. I've sold my business. I want to do something else, but I want to work because I'm smart and passionate, but I just want to have a bit more flexibility. And they're your delivery people, and they're like, they need something to do, a format. They don't want to really create a business because it's hard and challenging and risky, but the clients are like, wow, I get this person with real experience. They've done what I've done. They're not a
we joke
personal or I go, that's a great model.
And, we joke, and I'm a bit cheeky to some of my old consulting colleagues at some of the consulting firms, but we joke that we're we're a consulting firm full of non-consultants because we're actually all ex-CEOs. And that's where the practicality and the reality comes from. And some of those CEOs we've got have run startups that have got to sort of 30, 35 people and sold out. Some have run, $100, $500 million, Australian versions of one of the multinationals. Others have run, large property groups or large funds, so it's an amazing group of people. But you're right, they're all at the similar stage that I'm at, where they might be sitting on a board or two. They might be picking up some advisory work. They might be working for somebody a day a week, helping them out, on a sort of a 12 to 18 month type contract. But what we've done in a way to be able to package something up like this, because the other challenge when you go out on your own and do consulting is, doing bespoke proposals can take you 2 or 3 days, right? This way, when someone is actually interested, and we had one yesterday, we had the proposal to them in 5 minutes. Because it is what it is, right? It's like
That's a plan in 24
Here's the
hours.
explainer deck. Here's the proposal. We drop in obviously a little bit about what they've talked about in that in the first section, just to re-clarify the brief from them. But other than that, the proposal is, here's how the 4 6-hour sessions are going to run. Here's what we're going to cover off. So I think productizing things has been critical to it. We've also recently launched the 24-hour marketing plan, which one of your old colleagues, Jartha Taylor, is heading up. And we've already done about 12 in the first 12 months there. And again, we've done a couple of ASX companies. We're working with one of the large telcos to roll out something there for some of their high end sort of dealers and things like that. So that's been good. We've had a lot of interest in other, because people are now going, oh, actually, this is really good. If you can, chunk planning, business planning, or marketing planning down to a short time and help us work through that. You're not trying to out clever us. You're there to help us, because a lot of consultants occasionally go in to almost make the current team not look too smart with their smarts. Ours is all about how can we help you as quickly as possible and set you up for success going forward. So we've got other interest in sales plans. We've got other interest. A lot of companies at the moment, because of the mandatory carbon reporting that's coming in this country and globally, they're looking for ESG and sustainability plans. So we feel like we potentially have a pipeline of other offers coming. But when you're running a small business, you want to get the core parts of the business right first. And certainly as we globally expand, you can't do too many things at once. It is what it is. But look, it's a great bunch of people. I mean, socially, the other thing about senior people who go out on their own, like I have and the other team, is that you are often out on your own. You're doing things on your own. You miss a bit of, given we've all been ex-CEOs, you like walking into the office and chatting to people and, to your point, having that vibe you said earlier. So for me, we have a couple of social events every year. We all jump on a call every Monday morning at 7:45, and it's less about the business and more about what everyone did on the weekend, because it's a great way for senior people who are living not a lonely life, but it's an individual life now that they're leading, and they're used to a team life. So we're hopefully giving them something else to bring them back into that environment.
Some camaraderie, And the thing is, you're all similar, so you get each other because you're all in the same sort of situation, which I think is great. It reminds me of, you're the next Tim Ferriss, the 4-hour work week and the 4-hour body and the 4-hour work, but something that actually is useful. Because I don't know anyone who read that book and works 4 hours a week. So it's but it was a point of hacking and his sort of efficiency, which I did appreciate. But it's a model. You've got this model. You've got a brand, which I love. Being branding people, we both enjoy that. Is there a book coming out about the business plan? I'm sure you got one.
I think that's one part of the story I missed earlier. The original idea was that I was going to write a book on this, and I actually had spoken to a book coach about it, and I still am in touch with that book coach. And the book is partly, it's sitting on my laptop about 1/10 written instead of 9/10 written. And that was that was my original plan, was to pull all the learnings I'd had together from not having a business at that point, but pull it together into a book. And the more we talked about it, and the more we had the idea for the book and what was going on, the more we went, actually, these can be workshops, and off we went and built the business.
Yeah.
So but there is a book in train, and I just need some time. Like anything, like as having done a couple of books, you just need to you get some of that time out to write it. So I've got the structure. I've got the chapters all written, as in that there's 30 chapters in there. It's I've got all that covered. I've written the first few. Weirdly, I don't know what you were like, but I found the intro almost the hardest, because you're almost trying to summarize the book before you've written it. But it makes, for me, it was then ensuring that I was covering off all the points, the main points, and succinctly telling that story in that sort of first initial chapter. So anyway, it's sitting there. I'm looking at my other laptop down here.
In process.
It's constantly open in editable Google Docs. So when I'm on a plane, occasionally I'll jump on and start chopping away. But I think I need a whole. I remember you in the first one. I think you went away somewhere and
I did. I went to Bali, and like about a month ago, I went to Thailand and I wrote 30,000 words of the second book in 5 days, because there's just no distractions. It's like I'm there to write, and I just wrote. It was great. So
Done.
highly recommend that. Yeah. Well, hopefully, if you go away, we can do some book writing together. You never know. But what's next apart from that? What else is the on the agenda? Anything fun coming up for you?
Look, I think I still like to try and find that balance. My wife and I do like traveling. We have our daughter's in year 12, so helping her through that, and she's doing very well. Interestingly, also potentially wants to get into marketing, media, and comms. Yeah.
Oh, really?
So could be
So
another
let me know.
generation.
We'll help her
My
out.
cousin's daughter is in media, so she's the third generation on that side of the family. So look,
Yeah.
I think we've got a few holidays planned for mid this year and later in the year. So I think that's part of what keeps you going is to be able to have some downtime and look after yourself and do all those sorts of things. So that's always the means to the ends is work hard and hopefully get some reward at the other end of it.
Yeah. Well, that's the point. That's supposed to be the point of having a portfolio business is that you work hard, but you have control of your time. You can do those things when you want to do them. You just have to plan and schedule them. But so thinking about, like, let's say that there is a CEO who's still got that vision. They want to step out. They're going to do their own thing. What's your last parting words of advice? What would you say?
Yeah, look, I think it's interesting, and I'm going to tie it back to the 24-hour business plan. I think often what I hear and I see, and obviously the experience I went through, often people have great ideas in their head about what they might want to do with the business, but more often than not, they don't write it down. and by writing it down in a simple or long format, you actually it forces you to think through exactly what you're going to do. It's not just a concept in your head and I'm going to go and do this. And interestingly, only 4 out of 5 Australian companies do not have a plan. Right, that's the stat.
Yeah, wow.
So they're in my point, they're almost flying blind. And the statistics say that if you write a plan down, you increase your chances of growth by 48%. Right. So about 20 years ago, they studied 11,000 companies in the US, and they basically studied the growth across all those different companies, all different sectors, and went basically, one cohort had written a plan, one cohort hadn't, and the cohort that did grew by 48% more than the others. So for me,
wow. So for individuals, have a plan.
As an individual for yourself about what your plan might be as stepping out into a portfolio career, or for somebody that might be stepping out of, say, the corporate world to start their own business, the first thing for me is, write it down. It forces you to sense check it yourself. You can then share that with people to go, well, what do you think? Where am I at? You don't have to take their advice, but
it makes sense.
But it forces a bit more rigor. And then ideally, get it down succinctly is the other bit that we're learning. If it is about yourself, try and get it down to a page. So even if you write it longer form, then get a summary version down. So you can almost, when we all go through school, one of the techniques you're all taught is to, put little highlighters and write your notes in red before an exam. And then when you're in the exam, you half close your eyes and you can remember what's on the page and off you go. Well, in a sense, with planning and writing down goals for yourself, you want to do that in a similar way. And you want to be able to, on occasion, sit there and close your eyes and go, no, that was the plan I set for myself or my new business. That sort of visualization technique is important. Interestingly, whilst that stat around, write a plan, 48% growth, the stat around long jumpers, triple jumpers, high jumpers, ski jumpers, you often see them, and we'll see them in the Olympics coming up, where they close their eyes at the top of the runway and they almost rock backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
Moving their arms. They're visualizing doing the perfect jump and feeling doing the perfect jump. That's a technique that's taught. And those that use that technique jump better 45% of the time. So this whole visualization thing is pretty powerful if you can put it to good use. And that's what this is all about. So there's my little bit of advice is, get it down, do it simply, use a bit of visualization about where you think success can come from. And it's amazing what can happen.
No, I love that, because I remember you were always very clear, like, when we were talking, like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to do this and this and this, and I'm going to do this. And look, it changed a bit because it pivoted in this new opportunity. But, a lot of those thing. It opened the way for it to happen, rather than like, oh, I'm going to quit my job and then I'll think about it. It's like
No, no.
Because you have to do preparation steps on the way,
and
right?
be quite disciplined.
No,
I mean, there's that old
totally
adage is that follow the process, and if you follow the process well, most times it'll work. So
yeah. Now, my last question is, how's your Google reviews going? Because I know you were telling me in the last one I was up about 6 million.
Look that up right now.
I've looked mine up for a while. I think I was like 5-6 million or something last time. We have this competition of Google reviews of restaurants and cafes.
We'll just bring that up to the camera.
Can't say that at all. I have no idea what that says. I think it says 2.
Not going to do it. It's 119 million.
That's amazing. So where are they coming from? You reviewing the Louvre? And
they're mostly. I mean, mostly restaurants is what I do them at. And obviously I'm lucky enough to travel to various parts of the world, and I'm always taking pictures of the food and the restaurant and uploading them afterwards. And it started off as a bit of fun just to see. I mean, as a curious marketer by trade, all I was doing is going, oh, this is a new interesting little thing that Google's doing. I wouldn't mind playing around with it.
Yeah,
right?
Me too.
And the next minute, it took off. I think the one that keeps us the high. I think I was the person that actually typed the key restaurant in Sydney into Google, and obviously every single person that goes there from then on, you get rewarded for. So that's in the tens of millions. But a lot of the others, I think the normal ones I've put in there, and sometimes it's places that you least expect. You might be taking a photo of a Chinese restaurant in a country town in, somewhere in Australia, but no one else has actually put any pictures up, including the owner of the business.
To do it.
All of a sudden you get 2 million views of the outside of that restaurant or the inside of the restaurant or the food that they take. So I've got quite a few to add because, the last few weeks I've been traveling quite a bit. I've been in Singapore, Manila, Melbourne 3 times, Canberra, the Hunter Valley yesterday. So, and then off to regional New South Wales this afternoon. So I've got, I've been adding lots of photos of food, and at some point Google will remind me, do I want to add those, as you know? But it's, I think it's pretty, I think it's a good idea from Google at the time to want to have user generated pictures, because it's really easy for a restaurant or any business to put their own picture up to distort the, how big it might be or not be, and they really just want real pictures up there, and that, and you can see the algorithm actually rewards the more authentic pictures.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, it's a little sort of funny aside that we have, but it's also a good experiment in, just digital, like always looking for the next thing, experimenting, playing, seeing how it works. Because, you could do a whole case study on it from a user-generated content point of view, the gamification. There's no reward, there's no payment for it.
I don't know if you want to have this cut. I got invited to their Google Guide conference last year in San Fran. Basically, it was pay your own way and we'll sort it out when you get here. I didn't go. But that was interesting because I must have gotten to a certain point where you're one of the, I don't know what it is,
7 or 8 level or whatever it is. Yeah. Good stuff. It's always fun to talk, Andrew, and hopefully we get to have a lunch when you come back to Melbourne. You're not so busy, but good luck on the book. I hope that comes out soon. I'll be looking
cracking on your forward.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Andrew.